All right, we're live here on a Wednesday night. It's the Panther-Lair Show. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com is the YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, hanging out with you on a Wednesday night. Started a few minutes late, but I mean, what's new? Or what else is new? We do that all the time. And, what I need to do is get the stream loaded a little bit sooner on our YouTube page. So when I tweet out the link to the YouTube page and say, hey, we're gonna have a live show tonight, you go there and you can see that the stream is there. And I don't do a good job of that there. I think it's live now. I think it's on there now, so people can, when they go to the YouTube page, they'll see it and go to come to the stream and come and hang out and talk a little Pitt sports. We do it every Wednesday night, 8:30 p.m. on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can see the subscribe button there. Hopefully you can, I don't know if you can see it during the live stream or not, but you watch the video after the fact, you can see it there. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the video. That's big for us. It helps us get this, build this little enterprise here with the YouTube content. We put out Pitt video content a couple times a week. We got our Monday weekend recap. We run that Monday morning, kind of bring you up to speed on everything you might have missed from the week. We have, Fridays, we have a conversation podcast. It's a video interview, really. We sit down and talk with someone, Pitt player, coach, recruit, whoever it may be, someone we think is interesting and relevant that you might be interested in hearing from. And those have been really interesting. We talked to Blake Hinson last week, the transfer guard who came into Pitt from Marquette. And I thought that was a good conversation. I thought it was pretty interesting to talk to Blake. And I definitely enjoyed it, and I hope you did as well. And then, of course, on Wednesday nights, we do this. We have our live show where we go live 8:30 p.m. just for Pitt sports talk. I mean, it's an hour of live Pitt sports talk. When you tune in live, I know a lot of people watch it later in the week, but when you tune in live, you can post your comments and questions right there in the chat screen. You got something you want to ask, you got a comment you want to make, a response to something I'm saying, put it right there and we can talk about it. It's fun because it's interactive. It's kind of like a call-in show, except, we kind of screen the questions a little bit better. You don't have to listen to the callers and hear what they have to say. We can just throw the comment or the question out there and I can respond to it and we can continue sort of like a conversation. And I think that's fun. It's a different way of interacting as opposed to if I just sat here for an hour and talked, release a video of that. I don't know. I don't think it'd be quite as much fun because we get into different topics when people have questions about things or comments about things. We do get a lot of comments and questions in that chat screen. If you want to make sure your comment is read or your question is answered, use the super chat function down there at the bottom. There's a little $sign. This is during the live stream. You can't really do this after the fact. You can't do this if you're watching this video on Thursday or Saturday or something like that. You do it during the live stream. You contribute a couple bucks to the podcast. We definitely appreciate your support, and we'll make sure we get to your comment and question. Some of the regulars to the live stream know that they don't always get their comment read or their question answered. If you're a super chatter, you will absolutely get your comment read or your question answered, unless it violates our standards of decency or what have you. I mean, there's certain lines that we can't cross, but I think most people here tend to keep things on the level, and we appreciate that. Certainly appreciate anyone who wants to be a super chatter, and anyone who wants to jump in as that. Like I say, it's very much appreciated because we're doing this to try and build up the YouTube channel, try and build up our video content, but anything you can kick in always helps for sure. The website Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and of course, message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends. We put out a lot of content. We write a lot of articles, do a lot of interviews, do a lot of analysis, do a lot of, film breakdowns, all kinds of stuff. We put out a bunch of content items every day. And then, you consume those content items and then go to the message boards and talk to other Pitt fans about it. It's really, everything you can need, the content and the conversation. And that's really what I think people are looking for from online from online content is an opportunity to not only consume the content, but to have the conversation. And that's what we give you a chance to do. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. And there's a running joke on Panther-Lair.com, and it's been a running joke for a few years, and not without reason, that things tend to happen when I go on vacation. You know what I mean? If I'm going to be out of town, if I'm going to be off the grid, even to some extent, because I'm never really off the grid. When we go on vacation, still getting on my laptop, still getting on my phone every day, usually doing some work, because I never get all the work done before I leave. I always start out that week or two before vacation, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to get everything done so I can actually go on vacation and not have anything to do. It never works out that way. I always have stuff left to do. It's inevitable. I'll be sitting, in the house at the Outer Banks or something like that, and I'll be writing an article about a recruit or a breakdown of the running back recruiting board or something like that. I mean, it's inevitable. This always happens. And so it's a running joke, that if Chris goes on vacation, something makes him crack. I was sitting in the Pittsburgh International Airport waiting for a delayed flight to Newark when I started getting text messages and calls about Jordan Addison transferring to USC or entering the transfer portal at the very least, with USC as the likely destination. It was that Friday night. The news broke on a Friday night, and I was sitting at the gate, again, waiting for a flight to Newark that had been delayed. Taking the family to New York City. There was a whole situation with flight credits, and it just worked out that we were going to drive, and it made more sense to fly. Anyway, we're sitting in the airport when that news breaks, because I can't. It's inevitable that these things happen. This is what happens when I go on vacation. And so that being said, I'm gonna actually be out of town next week. We're gonna go on our annual family vacation. Saturday to Saturday type of thing, and we're going to Tennessee, and all hell is going to break loose. So if you're waiting for a big burst of summer news with regards to Pitt, it's all coming next week, because I'm actually going to be out of town and on vacation. So we're actually not going to have a live stream next. I don't think. I mean, who knows? I doubt that I'm going to want to do one from vacation. We're not. Don't plan on having a live stream to attend next Wednesday night at 8:30. I'm not going to have a weekend recap on Monday morning, and unless something comes together in the next day or two, we won't have any of those, a video interview for next Friday. We've got one for this week, but we won't have one for next week. So I'm tempting fate. Well, I'm not tempting fate. I mean, it's just inevitable. Things are going to happen. Now, I'll be on my computer a lot. I'll be on the phone a lot. And so if things happen, we'll still have it covered at Pantherlair.com. And, of course, Jim Hammett's going to be around, and Houston Wilson and our whole team at Pantherlair.com to cover all the news when it inevitably breaks. But just giving you a heads up well in advance, or at least a few days in advance. If you're waiting for Pitt news, it's coming, and it's coming next week, because I'm going to be on vacation. Now, I actually tempted fate this week, and I tried a different approach. I actually took the kids, we went on a little road trip Monday to Wednesday. Just got back today. But I didn't tell anybody about it. I told Jim Hammett that, hey, I'm going to be out of town, so just keep an eye on, in case anything happens. But I wasn't really offline. I was online the whole time anyway. But I was like, if I don't put anything on the message boards, if I don't say anything to anybody, maybe I will not tempt the gods, and there won't be any Pitt news, and we won't have anything to worry about. And that more or less happened. You know what I mean? This is more or less a quiet start to the week here, quiet first 3 days of the week. Even though I wasn't in Pittsburgh, sitting in the Panther-Lair.com offices, kind of glued to things as I usually am. But I guess that's not entirely true. I guess news, there was some news. Some things actually did happen. Monday, Pitt got a new commitment, or at least an announcement of a commitment. Lamar Seymour, the wide receiver from Miami, attends, where's he go? Miami Northwestern, I think, high school. He took an official visit to Pitt in mid-June, committed on his visit. And we can say that sort of definitively now because he has confirmed it. But he was one of those outstanding Pitt is it commitment tweets that Pat Narduzzi sends out, where Narduzzi announces a commitment and then we wait for the recruit himself to announce that he committed. And Lamar Seymour dragged it out for almost a month before he finally announced. Now, we had some indication that it was him. I think we put it on the message boards that we thought there was a good chance he was one of these unannounced commitments. There were 3. Really, there were 4. Jesse Anderson made his announcement a couple days after he committed. And then that left 3 more, Lamar Seymour being one of them. So there's still 2 more out there. But Seymour joins the class. He's the 16th announced commitment for the class of 2023 for Pitt. He's the 3rd wide receiver in the class, along with Zion Fowler from New Jersey and Kenny Johnson from Eastern PA. Fowler, of course, committed last fall. Johnson committed on the first official visit weekend of the month. So a couple of official visits producing wide receivers for Pitt thus far. 3 receivers in the class is a pretty big class, and we all know the Pitt coaches would like to get 4. We know Hakeem Williams is still out there. We know that's still a guy that they would like to obviously pull in as a top 15 prospect in the country, 5-star recruit, number 1 or number 3 wide receiver in the country or something. I forget exactly where he is. It's been a few weeks since I recited Hakeem Williams' rankings and stats right off the top of my head. So they would obviously like to get him, which means they're at least willing to take 4 receivers in the class. And when you have a bigger recruiting class like Pitt does, and this 2023 class is going to be a big one for Pitt, like a sizable one, a large one. And when you have that, you have the flexibility to take a bunch of guys. You know what I mean? You have the flexibility to take a lot at a certain position. Offensive line, they've got, 3, they could potentially take 3, 4, 5 linemen. They've already got 2 or 3 linebackers committed. I think they could potentially take as many as 4 in this class if they were so inclined. They've got 3 receivers. They obviously would be content to take 4. When you have a bigger recruiting class, it gives you the flexibility to load up at some of those positions. You really like Zion Fowler, and you got him early in the process. You really like Kenny Johnson. You were able to pull him in. You really like Lamar Seymour. You were able to get him, and obviously you would like to get Hakeem Williams if you can. I think linebacker is another one I think that's really interesting. They've got Braylon Lovelace from Leechburg. They've got Rasheem Biles from Ohio. I feel like I'm forgetting one. I know they're really high on and hoping to land, and maybe even expected to land, Jordan Bass, linebacker from Virginia. Yeah, and that's the 2 right now. So they have Lovelace and Biles right now. Expected to get Bass when he announces his commitment on September 1st. I think they potentially could even take 4. And what, when you're taking a bigger class like that, you've got the opportunity to take a variety of guys. You don't just need those guys who are going to be ready to come in and play in a year or 2. You can take guys who might need to develop for a couple of years because you're taking a bigger class. And so, I've seen some questions about Braylon Lovelace, a guy coming from a very small school at Leechburg, school that hasn't produced an FBS football player in like 30 years. The last one was Braylon Lovelace's dad, who went to Rutgers. There are questions about, is this guy really going to be able to come in and play? He's really skinny. Is he going to be able to fill out? How soon is he going to contribute? Well, you can take a guy like that who might take a couple of years to be ready to play because you're taking a bigger class. You're taking a larger group of linebackers, at least 3, if not 4. Same thing with wide receiver. You're taking at least 3, if not 4. Same thing with offensive line. You're taking at least 3, if not 5. You're trying to, when you're trying to build a class, a bigger class like this, a class of numbers, in addition, and not just quantity. You want quality, obviously, but you can take sort of a wider variety. You could take a few, and I hate to say it because it sounds like a pejorative, but you could take some projects. You can take some guys who take a little while to develop. Now I'm getting off track from the actual commitment they got, who's Lamar Seymour. And Seymour's not, I would not call him a project. I think he's a receiver prospect, really good size. He's a guy who's committed to Miami for almost 2 years, committed at the end of his freshman year, I guess it would have been, the spring of 2020, when recruits really couldn't go on visits. And then he commits, he took he was committed since the spring of 2020, stayed with that commitment at least formally or publicly. Who knows if it, kind of behind closed doors, it was understood that he was going to move on, but he took his official visit to Pitt. And just a couple days after that official visit, announced that he was decommitting from Miami. Went through the process of naming a top 5 before he, finally committed to Pitt, or announced for Pitt, despite the fact that he had actually committed to Pitt at the end of his official visit. I think I've talked before about how this year has been a very weird year for recruiting. There's a lot of weird stuff we've seen, and certainly a guy committing on Sunday, a few days later announcing his decommitment from a different school, a few days after that announcing his top 5, and then finally announcing his commitment would rank pretty high on the weirdness scale. But that's okay. However these guys want to carry their recruitment is up to them. We've certainly seen some interesting scenarios this June. We've seen a lot of interesting things play out. It's been curious to watch, and the fact that there are still 2 unannounced commitments is just kind of further evidence, or another example of what I'm talking about. But I like the Seymour commitment. I mean, obviously the Pitt coaches have been really high on him. He's a Charlie Partridge guy. He really likes Taekwon Underwood, and I think he's another nice addition to the receiving corps. And they do need to build up, I think, the receiving corps at Pitt. We're doing the series right now on the on Panther-Lair.com, the Anatomy of a Position series, where we break down each position and look at the last 5 years of recruiting to look at how the current group came together. And I always think it's interesting because the last 5 years of recruiting should have built the current roster. That's where this roster should come from. The classes of 2018 to 2022. Kids in the 2018 class should be fifth-year players this year. Redshirt seniors, potentially guys who are super seniors, and then on down through the 2019, 20, 21, and 22 class, with that last one being the incoming freshman. And it's interesting to look at how the rooms were built, like the receivers, right? I mean, to look back at the recruiting classes from the last 5 years of how they came together and kind of what happened to each of those guys. So, I mean, you look since 2018, Pitt has signed, 11 wide receivers? Scholarship guys, 3, 6, 9, 11. All right? In the classes of 2018 and 2019, they signed 4 guys. 3 of them have transferred. Shockey Jacques-Louis, Cameron O'Neal, Will Gibson. Now, O'Neal and Gibson, I don't think actually ever landed anywhere. O'Neal might have gone to a junior college. I'm not sure he went anywhere after that. Jared Wayne, though, is the one guy from those 2 classes who's still on the roster. So that sort of takes out any of your upperclassmen, veteran leadership, at least of guys you've recruited. You get into the 2020 class, you get Jordan Addison, Jalen Barton, and Henningham. Henningham moved to linebacker. Barton is still here, and Addison, you know what happened there. Then the 2021 class, Miles Alston, Jaden Bradley, they're obviously still here, and then Addison Copeland and Che Wabuko just arrived. Copeland came in January. Wabuko's on campus now. You look at the roster then, that's, again, 11 guys that you recruited who should be built, making up the foundation of your roster. Only 7 of them still at Pitt. And so there's a bit of a, you had attrition. You had attrition, which I think is to be expected to some extent, although I don't know if you expect to lose 4 out of 11 over a 5-year period. And then you look at the current roster and you see, to some extent, those recruiting losses or misses are why they've then gone and added Konate Mumfield, and Bub Means. Added these guys as transfers. Now, all that being said, I think when you look through the classes, there's 1 senior in the scholarship receivers. That's Jared Wayne. There's 2 juniors in the scholarship receivers. It's Jalen Barton and Bub Means. And then everyone else, you get down into Copeland as a freshman, Mumfield's a sophomore, Miles Alston is a redshirt freshman, and Che Wabuko is a freshman. And then you have a handful of walk-ons in there as well. I think one thing we've talked about, and I actually recall talking about this heading into spring camp, talked about it as one of the storylines about the receivers, is that, even with Jordan Addison, and certainly even more without him, you had a really solid, talented group of wide receivers. But there just weren't a lot of them. You know what I mean? If you look at, even with Addison, all right, you add Jordan Addison, who did you have in addition? You had Jared Wayne, Konate Mumfield, Jalen Barton, Jaden Bradley. In terms of experienced receivers, guys who have been on the field and contributed in some degree. Guys that you would be, I think, reasonable to have high expectations for. That's not a lot. I mean, it was basically 5 guys. Wayne, Barden, Mumfield, Bradley. And now you take Jordan Addison out of that mix, and you're left with those 4. Wayne, Barden, Mumfield, Bradley. And so you add in Bub Means as another transfer, another experienced player, another scholarship guy to come in and sort of supplement the roster. But you still don't have a ton at wide receiver. Your numbers are not great. And I think that's part of the reason why the coaches have taken this big recruiting class this year and dedicated a fair amount of resources, at least 3 if not 4 wide receivers spots out of a 20 to 23 man class to the receiver position. I think there's a feeling that they need to reload with some numbers, even though they've signed 2 receivers in each of the last 2 classes and 3 in the class before that. You know, outcomes notwithstanding, where Addison transfers and Henningham moves to linebacker. So I think they did feel like they needed a larger receiver class in this 2023 group, just to kind of rebuild and just supplement. You know what I mean? Create a new foundation and add numbers to a position where the numbers were kind of dwindling. They're not in terrible shape, but 1 and certainly 2 key injuries could put them in a real pickle, a real jam as it relates to the receivers. So, you know, Lamar Seymour joined Zion Fowler and Kenny Johnson. Pitt would obviously like to add Hakeem Williams to that group and, really reload at wide receiver with this 2023 recruiting class. It's funny because I said they would be in a real pickle, and that reminded me there was one other bit of news that happened while I was out of town early this week, and that's the changing of the name at Heinz Field. And I want to get to the comments and questions. I don't need a lot of time about this. I don't care. Okay, it's going to take me a little while to get used to writing Acrisure Field as opposed to Heinz Field. It won't take that long to figure that out. It won't take that long to get used to calling it that. I just don't care. And I think my reaction is spurred even more by how people online have reacted. And people get provincial around here, and I understand that. We love Pittsburgh stuff. I have a shirt that says Yins, for Pete's sake. I'm wearing, you know what I mean? Like, sure, we all love Pittsburgh stuff, but seriously, who cares? I just don't care. It's not a surprise that the Steelers, or the Sports and Exhibition Authority, whoever it is, sold out to the highest bidder. I would expect nothing less. I would do nothing less if I was them. Why would I give a discount to Heinz or anyone like that? Take the most money you can get. In all walks of life, everything that we do, you should try to get the most money you can. You don't want to cause harm to anyone to get that most money, but you should try to get the most that you can. That's normal. But ultimately, I just don't care about this. It was something I looked at and said, and moved on to the next thing until I realized that a whole big portion of the population of Pittsburgh Twitter was not moving on to the next thing. They were very much stuck on that thing. And I had no connection, personal, emotional, otherwise, to it being called Heinz Field, despite the fact that it's been called that for more than 20 years. I had no connection to that whatsoever. And I will have no connection to Acrisure Field either. It's the stadium where the Steelers and Pitt play. You want to continue calling it Heinz Field? Go for it. Vaya con Dios. You want to call it Acrisure Stadium or Field or whatever the heck they're calling it? Go for it. I'll write that because that's the proper journalistic thing to do. I just don't care. And that's my thought on that. I forgot that news did happen while I was out of town. Let's see here. Let's see what the comments and questions are. Got a couple of super chatters. Looks like Jake Pagliaro. I appreciate you, Jake, for being a super chatter. Says, I said it's going to be a battle to get Hakeem Williams. What goes into that? What does the Pitt staff have to do to increase their chances of getting him? All right, so, I mean, look, there's a simple reality. And I think we all know this reality when it comes to recruiting in 2022, when it comes to recruiting the class of 2023, recruiting the classes of 2024 and 25 and beyond. Name, image, likeness is part of this. It's part of the recruiting process. It's part of college sports right now. There's no way around that. And I can't sit here and say Pitt is doing this or Pitt is doing that because I don't know. I don't know what Pitt is doing. It's very hard for me to believe Hakeem Williams will choose a college without some sort of NIL deal. I think it's just gonna it's just gonna be part of it. Like most top guys, and maybe even some guys that aren't that top. But most high-end recruits are going to get some kind of NIL deal going into college. And I think it's just part of the game now. It's just part of the game. And it would very much surprise me if Hakeem Williams chooses a college where he's not getting an NIL deal. If Pitt decides that they don't want to play that way, if Pitt decides that they don't want to participate in that side of recruiting, and they're still able to land Hakeem Williams, it would be a real surprise to me. And that's not an insult on anyone. That's not a criticism of anyone. That's not attacking anyone's character. I'm not saying Hakeem Williams is taking the money. Just like I said about the Steelers and Acupuncture Stadium, take the money. Go get it. Go get the money. If someone is offering you money, take it. And so I don't fault any of the recruits who get NIL deals. I don't fault any of the current players who get NIL deals. I don't. The money's there. Someone's offering it to you. And it's within the rules that they're doing so. Take the money. And so if Pitt or Georgia or Texas A&M or whoever gets Hakeem Williams, when they sign him, I'm going to assume that there was some sort of NIL deal in place. And if I'm later told by sources that I trust, people that I believe, credible sources, that there was no NIL deal in place at Georgia or Pitt or Texas A&M or wherever ends up signing Hakeem Williams, I will report that. I will. My expectation for any 5-star recruit and most 4-star recruits, maybe all 4-star recruits, maybe a lot of 3-star recruits, my expectation for those guys this year and going forward is that they will have NIL deals when they sign. And that'll be part of their recruitment. That's just my expectation. Like I say, if I'm told by credible sources, people I believe and trust, that it didn't happen, then I'll report that. I'll say that too. But my expectation is that's part of it. Now, is that what's going to ultimately make his decision? I mean, I can't speak for Hakeem Williams. I can't tell you. What can Pitt do to help their chances? I mean, I think they have to keep emphasizing the things that have gotten them to this point thus far. Remember how Hakeem Williams ended up having Pitt so high on his list? All right, it started off with a relationship with Taekwon Underwood when Underwood was at Rutgers. Underwood's relationship with Hakeem Williams was so strong that he was able to get Williams to take a serious look at Rutgers, of all places. If you ever want to get an idea of what that relationship is like between Taekwon Underwood and Hakeem Williams, just come back to that he had Williams seriously looking at Rutgers. All right, that tells a whole lot of the story right there. Underwood goes to Pitt. That relationship carries over. Now Williams is looking seriously at Pitt. Enter Charlie Partridge as being part of the factor as well. All right, he's an element here. And between the two of them, in addition to the efforts of Pat Narduzzi, they're able to get Williams to Pitt for an unofficial visit in the spring. Huge step, because Williams and his family come up, they see what Pitt's all about, they get a feel for the campus and the coaches, and they really like it. All right, that was step number 2. And then step number 3, they get him back for an official visit in the summer. Now, when they bring Hakeem Williams in for his unofficial visit in the spring and his official visit in June, I mean, they're doing everything they can to roll out the red carpet. They're doing everything they can to impress him. They're doing everything they can to climb, his list and be one of his top schools, which they already are because they got one of his 2 official visits for the month of June. But what they're really doing is emphasizing how they will take care of him, how it's a family, how Hakeem Williams would be part of their family. And not just him, but his extended family, how his mother would feel like part of the family. Those are the key things. So that when Hakeem Williams and his mother left Pitt's campus for the official visit, when they left, they felt like they were leaving family. They felt like they were leaving home. And that's how Pitt has gotten into such a strong position with Hakeem Williams. It's not just the glitz and the glamour and the NILs and all these other things that all the schools have to do. It's the relationships they've established and the relationships they've built and the connections they've made. That's the key. And so, you ask me, what does Pitt need to do to improve or give itself a better chance in that battle? They have to keep building those relationships and make sure they're strong. They can never let Hakeem Williams ever forget about Pitt. They can never let him forget about the experiences he had at the official visit. They can never let him forget what it felt like when he was at Pitt. And that means every day you're in touch with him. That relationship between Williams and Taekwon Underwood, between Williams and Charlie Partridge, between Williams and Pat Narduzzi, it's got to stay strong. Okay? It has to be strong. Those bonds have to be unbreakable. And that's going to give Pitt the best chance to land one of the top receivers in the class of 2023. Maybe the best receiver in the class of 2023. The dude's a cheat code. He's huge and he can run. I mean, you watch his film and you say, there's no way a guy his size should be able to move like he does. It's ridiculous. And he could be a game changer at Pitt from the jump. From day one. Walk in, start, be a huge impact player. And I mean, like, talent level is the type of talent that you expect him to be in the Biletnikoff conversation in 2 years. I mean, you expect that, which is just a testament to how good he is. But that's what it's going to come down to. If they're going to get him, it's going to be those relationships. All right, TRR says, so 27 seniors are on the roster. What do you predict? 20 recruits and 7 super seniors filling the allotment for 2023? Well, all right, so we're talking about the scholarship roster. A couple things there. One, the number never ends up being exactly what the number starts as. And what I mean by that is, okay, they have 27 scholarship seniors. That doesn't mean they're only going to get 20 recruits and 7 super seniors and be done with it. The number of what they bring in is always bigger than how many available spaces it looks like they will have when we're looking at it in July and August. There will be transfers out. We know this by now, right? I mean, we know this for a fact. And I can't sit here and tell you the 5 guys that are most likely to go. I can't sit here and tell you guys that I'm hearing about. I can't tell you any of those things. I'm not hearing names. But it will happen. And there'll be random crazy surprises like Wendell Davis in the middle of the season. There'll be expected ones like A.J. Davis and Todd Sibley. I don't think we were surprised by those. There'll be guys at positions where you expect somebody to go, like Joey Young and David Speville. Figured somebody was going from the quarterback position, right? We knew somebody was leaving. We weren't sure who, we weren't sure when, but we knew somebody was going to go. And those 2 guys end up going. There will always be, you're going to have attrition just from transfers. And then you'll have some guy, maybe you'll have a guy who's academically ineligible or a guy who retires from football or a guy who medically can't, you're going to have a bunch of spots that open up beyond those 27 scholarship seniors you see on the roster right now. So that even if you get 5 or 6 or 7 of them back as super seniors, I don't want to say make up the difference with, other attrition, but you still end up having other guys go. And so your number ends, your number of available scholarships to fill prior to the 2023 season might still be 25, 26, 27. Now, they're not all going to be recruits. You're going to end up with, just like you're going to have transfers going out, you're going to have transfers coming in. We know this at this point. It's not a question of whether it will happen. We don't really know how many. Who knows what position? I don't think a year ago at this time I would have told you, yeah, Pitt's going to really hit the transfer portal hard for wide receivers. But there you go. I think we probably guessed they would make a go at a quarterback. Once Kenny Pickett announced he was coming back for the 21 season, we probably all assumed that they would try and get a quarterback to come in for 2022. That one we could kind of see coming. And depending on how the guys on the roster turn out, maybe they'll go for one in next year too. But it doesn't matter. We know there's going to be, if this year was any indication, at least 5 transfers coming in. I think that's how college football is right now. You have to expect 5 to 7 transfers coming in every year. And probably even more going out every year. Now, to your ultimate question of the recruiting class, I mean, I could see them signing like 23 guys. I wouldn't be surprised. They've got 16 commitments already, plus the 2 that have not announced yet. So you're really looking at 18 commitments. In theory, you're going to lose 1 or 2 of those guys. You're going to add some other guys. I could see them, I mean, definitely pushing past 20. Maybe 21 to 23 is the range. And then you're going to get 5 to 7 extra, transfers. And that's how you're going to, fill up all your empty scholarship spots and get your roster ready for 2023. I mean, those things with transfers, I mean, you have to take them into consideration of the spots that are going to open up. And I think annually you will have more transfers go out than you bring in. I think of your Pitt. And that's what happened this year. They had, I forget the numbers. I have to go back. 16, 17 transfers that went out, 10 or so that came in. And I think, I was going to say I think that Pitt won that transaction, won that trade-off. The balance favored Pitt if you look at transfers out versus transfers in. But one of those transfers out was Jordan Addison. And so that's that. They were winning the transfer balance prior to Jordan Addison going out. If you look at the guys who left versus the guys they brought in, specifically just Keaton Slovis, Konate Mumfield, and Shane Simon, I think they won the transfer portal. But then Jordan Addison left, and that kind of that shifted the balance. He's only one guy, but that shifted the balance a whole lot. And I can't really call Pitt the winner of the transfer portal just because of how good he was and how important he was and how much he meant to the offense. So, but you're going to have that every year, and I wouldn't be surprised if the numbers. I don't know if they're going to have 16, 17 guys transfer out and 10 transfer in every year, but I mean I could see 12 to 15. Out and 6 to 8 or 9 coming in every year. Unless the rules drastically change, I think that makes a lot of sense for what Pitt should reasonably expect. And I think Pat Narduzzi's done a good job with transfers and with using the transfer portal since it became a thing, and even getting transfers before that. Where you look at Nate Peterman obviously was the biggest one, the one that we talk about the most. And the one who's made the most impact to this point, although I think that could change. Lucas Krull had a big year last year. He didn't make more of an impact than Nathan Peterman, though. I think that could change this year with Konate Mumfield and Keaton Slovis. Slovis probably would be the biggest one. I think Slovis stands to have the biggest impact of any transfer for Pitt yet, largely because the team we've talked about this a million times. The team that Slovis is going to take over has a whole bunch of guys back from the team that went 11-3. And so if he can be just above average, I would say. If he can be above average, they'll win a lot of games, and he'll be the most impactful transfer of the Pat Narduzzi era. Long way around of saying transfers are always going to be a part of this. And you're going to have to count that when you're looking at how Pitt will use open scholarships. And then, in addition to recruits. I don't think Pat Narduzzi wants to abandon recruiting altogether. I think he still wants to bring in guys that the coaches evaluate and like, that they believe they can coach up, that they believe they can develop into 3, 4, 5-year players. And it's going to be a little bit trickier with guys who transfer out, and inevitably those will be guys that you did recruit. But I think he still wants to build the team through that route. And so it's still going to be the bulk of the new players who come in each year will be recruits. Let's see here. Brock Madonic says, could you see Pitt pursuing Amarian Brown, who will not be enrolling at Rutgers anymore? Looks like Coach Underwood was his primary recruiter at Rutgers. Believe they still have one scholarship left for 2022. Do you think they'll end up using that last scholarship on another wide receiver? So Amarian Brown, I'm going to get up his rival's profile right here. In the class of 2022, a 4-star wide receiver, committed to Rutgers last March of 2021, signed with the Scarlet Knights, but he will not enroll. The news was broken today by our Rutgers site. The Knight Report says he's going to go to a junior college instead. So it makes it sound like he did not qualify. If he didn't qualify at Rutgers and he's going to go to a junior college, I don't think it's very likely that Pitt would get him on the roster this year. Maybe down the road, in a year or two, once he does what he needs to do to get eligible through the junior college, maybe they would make a go for it. But for right now, I would say no. There is, we currently have Pitt projected to be at 84 scholarships for the 2022 season. The, obviously the NCAA limit is 85, so they have one more scholarship to use, like Brock was saying. And I don't, it's not like they haven't added guys over the summer in the past. They've added summer transfers. Ryan Jacoby came in late last year. The kid from the offensive lineman from Texas, what was his name? Brandon Hodges came in like really late in the process. They've added a few guys like that over the years. I don't expect that to happen. Right now, it could, but I don't expect it to happen. I think they're probably done adding transfers. My guess with that last scholarship, honestly, would be that it would go to a walk-on, and I think it would probably be Sam Scarton. Sam or Jake? I always mix up which Scarton is on the roster right now. I think it's Sam. Let me look. Yeah, Sam Scarton. Sam Scarton, who was their primary place kicker last year, kicked 17 of 21 field goals, 69 extra points, set a Pitt's kick scoring record with 120 points. Was second in the ACC in total points scored, and third in the ACC in points per game. Blah blah blah. I would expect. And he was a walk-on for all of that. Ben Sauls was on scholarship, and he was the kickoff specialist. I would expect either Ben Sauls wins the place kicking job or Sam Scarton goes on scholarship. That's my guess of where that last scholarship will go. I don't think you want your primary field goal kicker not on scholarship. I think you want to take care of that guy and do right by him because he did so much for you last season. And if he's your primary place kicker again this year, he's going to be doing a lot for you this year. So, that's my guess of where it would go. I would guess a walk-on, some walk-on, would be the one. You know what I mean? It would be some walk-on who gets the scholarship. And personally, I think Scarton probably makes the most sense. Pittsburgh Sports All the Time says, this isn't exactly a pick question, but how do you feel about all this conference realignment nonsense? It's... We've talked about it a few times over the last couple weeks. It's not a surprise. Schools have been making moves for money for the last decade. Pitt did it to the ACC. Syracuse did it going to the ACC. Obviously, you go back around that time, Nebraska went to the Big Ten, A&M and Missouri went to the SEC. Colorado jumped from the Big 12 to the Pac-12. Who else moved? Utah joined the Pac-12, but they didn't come from another Power 5 conference. Rutgers and Maryland made their jumps to the Big Ten. Even going back, Virginia Tech, Miami, Boston College, going from the Big East to the ACC back in 2003 and 2004. Schools have been jumping conferences for money for a long time. And so it's not necessarily surprising, but it still catches you off guard. It caught me off guard last summer when Texas and Oklahoma announced they were going to the SEC. It caught me off guard this summer when USC and UCLA announced they were going to the Big Ten, which makes even less sense than Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC. Like, geographically, makes less sense. It all makes sense in terms of money. And all of these things are driven by money. And what I've said about Pitt from the jump is Pitt should do everything in its power to help the ACC stay together. It should do everything in its power to support conference leadership, whatever outreach needs to be done, whatever moves need to be made, whatever phone calls need to be made, whatever it is. Whatever the ACC needs, Pitt should be doing everything it can to help. At the same time, Pitt should be finding out if there's any chance at all of getting into the Big Ten. You really have to work both. And I believe every school in the ACC, every school in the Big 12, every school in the Pac-12 or Pac-10 or Pac however many are left, they're all doing the same thing. Everything they can to keep their conferences together. Everything they can to find out if there's any way out. Now, I don't think there's any good way out for Pitt. I don't think there's any good way out for any of the schools in the ACC. I think the grant of rights holds a lot of these schools in place. I think there's sort of a notion that lawyers will find a way out of the grant of rights. I think probably a lot of those schools have had their lawyers looking at the grant of rights for a long time. And the grant of rights, if you don't know, is an agreement that each of the teams in the conference signed, basically giving the ACC their media rights, their broadcast rights, so that their games are broadcast as part of the ACC's media package, and the revenue goes to the conference. So that if Clemson were to leave the ACC and go to the SEC, their games would still need to be part of the ACC's media package, and the ACC and the schools still in the league would get the revenue from Clemson's games, even though Clemson was in the SEC. You can see how jumbled that situation would be, how tangled it would be. And so, and all the schools signed this. I think back in 2013 or something. All the schools in the ACC signed this. I think Notre Dame might have even signed for its sports other than football. But either way, all the schools in the ACC signed this. And, David Hale at ESPN made a good point that if there were really a way out of the grant of rights, somebody would have found it by now. They've certainly been looking. Schools like Clemson and Miami and Florida State and North Carolina have been looking, to be sure. I'm sure, and probably the rest of the conference too, has been looking. And nobody's found a way out of it yet. Because if they had found a way out of it, they would have done it. They would have gotten out. But they obviously haven't found anything they feel confident enough about taking to court. Because I think if the SEC had a chance to get Clemson and Miami and Florida State, they would do it in a heartbeat. Certainly Clemson, one of the biggest brands in college football right now, they would do it in a heartbeat. And so the only holdup is whatever's keeping Clemson in the ACC, and by all accounts, what's keeping Clemson in the ACC is the grant of rights. And so Pitt would need to find a way around that in order to try to get to the Big Ten, who probably doesn't even want them right now. So for Pitt, the best case scenario, the most realistic scenario, I actually wrote about this last week in the 321 column on Panther-Lair.com, that, the dream scenario, the best case dream scenario is going to the Big Ten. Finding a way out of the grant of rights, getting invited to the Big Ten, and joining that conference. It makes sense geographically, it makes sense culturally, and it makes sense, most importantly, financially. That would be the best move, the perfect move. Short of that, the best case realistic move, the most realistic ideal scenario is the ACC holding together. And whether that means uneven revenue sharing so that schools that produce more revenue get a bigger piece of the pie, whether that means adding more schools to the conference, whether it means a combination of both things, whatever it is. That's probably Pitt's best chance at survival and staying in that upper tier of college football, what we call now the Power 5. It's quickly becoming the Power 2. But if you want to stay in that upper tier, you need to be a Power 3. You need the ACC to be right there behind, but right there with the SEC and the Big Ten. And so that's Pitt's most realistic, ideal scenario. Whether that happens remains to be seen. I think it'll be quiet for a little while. We got about a year of peace last year, right? Texas and Oklahoma were announced last summer. Then we had a year of peace. We get to this summer, and it's USC and UCLA. We'll see what next summer brings. But for now, seems like it's quiet. All right, scroll through comments and questions here. Vincent Calfo says, given the experience of the reserve offensive lineman from last year, do you see any backup cracking the starting lineup week one? No, I really don't. I never say never, but in this case, I would probably say never unless they come out with some goofy alignment. I think your starting offensive line is left to right is Carter Warren, Marcus Minor, Owen Drexel, Jake Cradle, Gabe Hoy. I think those five guys, they're penciled in, but it's a pencil without an eraser. You can write over it with pen if you're so inclined, but they're written in there, and I think they're holding tight, and I think they're going to stay in that position. I like holding this pen better. I just switched pens because I like this. This pen's a little more comfortable. It's a good hotel pen. Those five guys. The experience they have, the way they played last year. I think Jake Cradle should be 100% healthy by the time the season starts. I think everybody will be ready to go. Those are your 5. Now, yeah, you got Matt Gonsalves got a lot of playing time last year. You got Blake Sabovic a lot of playing time last year. I think what's his name? Who am I thinking? Branson Taylor saw some playing time, although he got hurt. But I think there's a lot of optimism about him. I think the coaches are really optimistic about Ryan Jacoby. I think they're optimistic about a lot of the younger linemen. So when Warren and Minor and Drexel and Hoyer are all gone after this season, because those guys, they're playing as super seniors this year. They can't come back in 2023. But, even if the only guy you bring back is Cradle, you've got Jacoby and Taylor and Gonsalves and Zabovic, they're ready to play. And I mean, that should fill in your starting 5. I mean, to be honest, I really think it should, unless they bring in a transfer or something like that, which is not out of the question. That could be. I think if you can get a good, quality, experienced offensive lineman in the transfer portal, you should do it all the time. I think that's a position that always can use an upgrade. I think you can always get better on the offensive line. And if there's a talented transfer out there that you have a chance to get, you should go get him, always, without hesitation. And so they could look to do that. But even if they don't, I think some of those reserves that we mentioned, some of those guys who played a lot last year, who will certainly see playing time this year, either due to injury, rotation, or a blowout, those guys I think will get more snaps this year and be ready to really step into starting roles next season. They're going to have almost an embarrassment of riches when it comes to experience this year on the offensive line. And then it's going to be a bit of a reset for next year, but they're not resetting with totally unproven players. I think they're resetting with guys who should be pretty good and have a chance to be really good once they really get settled and accustomed to playing all the snaps that these offensive linemen play. The guys like Warren and Minor and Drexel and Cradle and Hoy have played. So I don't think any of them takes a starting job this year, but I think they're going to get snaps, they're going to get playing time, and they're going to be ready to step into the starting lineup next season. Luke Whalen says, do you get a sense that Pitt has a good chance with Quentin Martin? So that's going to be a challenge. That one's going to be a tough one. Quentin Martin is 4-star wide receiver. 4-star, I guess, athlete prospect is how we have him. And athlete is probably a good designation for Quentin Martin, kid out of Bell Vernon going into his junior year. He's in a recruiting class of 2024. And he could play anywhere. He could play running back, he could play receiver, he could play tight end, H-back, one of those kinds of spots. He could play linebacker, either outside or inside. He could play safety. He says he could even play corner. I don't know about that. He's pretty big already, like 6'2", 205 or so. As a guy going to his junior year, I think a guy with that kind of size is probably going to outgrow corner if he hasn't already. But he's a stud though. He's a plus athlete. He's fast. He's got move. He's a great football player. And you look at his production from last year, and it's funny. I think if you watched Bell Vernon or followed along last season, you would say, yeah, he was kind of running second fiddle to Devin Whitlock, a kid who played sort of a wildcat quarterback for Bell Vernon. And ended up, is going to be a walk-on at Pitt. Martin didn't really do that much compared to Whitlock. And, how good is he if he's, playing behind a walk-on? Well, Quentin Martin played only 8 games. He was dealing with an injury. And when he was out there, he averaged something like 11 or 12 yards per carry for 900 yards. So when he was out there, he got an opportunity to make a lot of plays. And now he's going to step into that primary role, be kind of that wildcat quarterback role that Whitlock was, and I think he's just going to put on a show. And I think his future is probably best on offense. I think he could be a stud on defense, but I think he could be a superstar on offense. I think he could be a tall running back who, which you don't usually see. I mean, he's taller than me. He's a legit 6'1", 6'2". But I think he could be a tall running back and just take over. What are Pitt's chances like? And they're right there in the mix for it. They're right there in the hunt. Now, he's got everything. He can go anywhere he wants to go. My guess is it's going to be, a Penn State or an Ohio State or a Pitt would probably be my top 3 guesses. And that's going to be a real battle. I think Penn State, obviously, they do what they do on the recruiting trail. Ohio State is Ohio State. Pitt's got good relationships and good connections with Quentin Martin. They're obviously the hometown school. He feels very comfortable with the coaching staff, but it's going to be a real battle. And just like we talked about with Hakeem Williams, and again, this is not about character or anything like that, but just like we talked about with Hakeem Williams, you get these top rated recruits, these top guys who have options across the country. NIL is going to be a factor. It just is. That's just inevitable. Now, Quentin Martin could walk in here right now and say, hey man, what are you talking about? I am not doing NILs. Okay, fine. Maybe you are the unique one, because I'm pretty sure everybody else in the country is. This is going to be part of the recruiting conversation until the rules change, or until the situation changes, or until the approach changes. This is going to be the situation with all the top guys. It really is. And I think Quentin Martin will probably end up being the same. Let's see here. Pittsburgh Sports All the Time says, I'm predicting it now. Since Chris is going on vacation, Pitt will... I lost your comment. Where did it go? Pitt will announce they're moving to the Big Ten. Yeah, in case you missed it, I am... I'm going to be out of town next week. We're going to Tennessee for our family vacation. Never been there before, so it'll be interesting to see. Well, I mean, I've been to the state of Tennessee, but never this area, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. So we're not going to have a live stream next Wednesday night. Or no weekend recap or anything like that. We're gonna take the week off from the video content. So I apologize if you're gonna miss that. But on the upside, there's gonna be lots of news for you to talk about, because there's always news when I go on vacation. Let's see if there's any other comments and questions to get to here. There's a lot, but I don't know if we're gonna have time to get through them all, because we're up to around 9:30 or so here. Alan Olive is saying a whole lot of things. I don't know what you're asking about. Is Bub Means eligible? So that's a good question. Bub Means, the wide receiver, transferred in. He already has transferred once. He went from Tennessee to, where was he? Southeastern Louisiana State. I forgot what school he transferred to. But since he already transferred once, he's not going to be automatically eligible to play this season. So that... he'll need a ruling from the NCAA. I think he should get it. I don't think anything has been announced yet. All right, let's see. So here's the last one. We'll leave it on this. Christian Kosmak says, if we could win a second consecutive conference title, we can demonstrate the future of the program. Big Ten invite would still be the best possible end game. Yeah, if you were able to go win if you go win 11 games again, and you win another ACC, or you're in the playoff conversation, you make the playoffs. I mean, all of those things would help, but they're not going to guarantee you an invite to the Big Ten or the SEC. You've got to be able to add something in terms of revenue, whether it's your market, your alumni base, something that's going to make them more money. And I don't think just winning the ACC or just making the playoffs, or even winning a playoff game, whatever it is, I don't think that alone makes you that much more attractive in terms of profitability. You've got to be able to add something in terms of your brand and your market. And like I say, your alumni base. How many eyeballs are you going to bring to the TV and to the streaming service? That's where the money is being made now. And that's what the money is being paid for. And the schools that can bring those things are the ones that are going to get invites to the big conferences. And I don't know, even another ACC championship, I don't know if it's enough to make that happen. Not when Penn State already has the Big Ten, and the SEC, or the Big Ten already has Penn State, I should say, and the SEC likely has its eyes on schools like Clemson, Florida State, and Miami, maybe North Carolina as well. So I don't know. I'm not in those conversations. I'm not, in those meetings behind closed doors or anything. I can't say for certain what the motivating factors are, the deciding factors. I just don't know if Pitt is the draw that it needs to be at this juncture to get in. Now, maybe the Big Ten could add a couple more schools and be, at 17 or 19 and need one more to fill it in, and Pitt would make sense in that case, maybe. But I don't know. Short of that, I'm not really sure what Pitt could do to get in. So Who knows? We'll see. Maybe we'll find out next week. Like Pittsburgh Sports all the time said, we'll find out next week when I'm on vacation and the news inevitably breaks. So like I said, we're not going to have a live stream next week. We're taking the week off on that. We'll be back the following week, which would be the 27th. We'll be back on July 27th, which I think is our final live stream before training camp starts. Wrap your head around that one. Today's the 13th. I'm going to be off next week, the 20th. The following week's the 27th. 2 weeks from tonight, our final live stream before training camp starts. Woo, doggy. Where did the summer go? It's going fast. I'm going to take a vacation before it ends. So make sure you like this video. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Do that. It really helps us out. Hit that like button. What do the kids say? Smash. Smash that like button. Smash the subscribe button. That way you always know when we post a new video, whether it's our weekend recap or our Friday video interviews, or you'll always know when we go live for the Wednesday night live stream at 8:30. We do it every Wednesday night, except next week. And, it's fun. We have a fun hour of Pitt sports talk. Make sure you also check out the website, Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com to stay up to date on all the Pitt sports news. Oh, we got one more super chatter in. It's our friend Michael B. Michael, thank you so much. I appreciate you for being a super chatter. That's a big one. I definitely appreciate it. That is huge, and we appreciate everybody who's a super chatter and everybody who jumped in on the chat this week. All the people who added the comments and the questions. It's always fun. It's fun to have these conversations once a week here on the Panther-Lair Show. So thanks again for checking it out. Thanks for watching the video. If you check it out later in the week or listen to the podcast, however you find us, have a great rest of the week. Have a great weekend. Have a great week next week. And we'll talk to you in 2 weeks on July 27th. Thanks again, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.